Hello, continuing from where we left off from the part 1 of this tutorial. Let's see what else can be done, but before that we can notice that we have some issues here. So all our buttons in the navigation bar are active by default. See, if we remove this class here, it should be like this. For example, in the case we have the dashboard selected, it should be this way. So what can we do is that we can actually very easily use Angular directives to specify this active class using something called router link active. So we can do this by removing this part from here, because by default we specified all of them as active. So we can say here router link active equals, and here we specify the class that we want to apply when the link is becoming active. You can pass here an array if you want, so you can specify more than one class or other conditions and so on. You can look on the documentation in Angular for all of these directives. They are very well explained. So let's see our app in action now. So we see that now our application loads. We have the dashboard, we have the cars. So one thing that we can see here is that when we click on this one, here we are going directly to the empty route. So this means that every time this router link active will be active by default. So we will add this route here, and we'll specify in the routes we'll specify a new route called dashboard. Even if we have it already defined here, we specify specifically for this component a new route. So this should fix the issue. So if we go on dashboard, we should have lovely navigation. Moving on, let's see our tasks at hand. So we have to let's see, for example, point 6. So here it says that create a component that we will use to add a car in the previously hard-coded list using a service and an Angular form. So here we can use a template or reactive form, it's your choice. If you look below, if you complete this with a reactive form, you actually get an extra point. But in our case, we'll just do it with a regular form, and when we get to the last point, we'll switch to a reactive form. So this means that we need a new component, we need a new service, and this means that we need to handle our hard-coded list using this service, not the component. This means that we need to rewire the call for the get cars from the flat file to the service. So in this case, we're going to start directly using our Angular CLI. So as you already know by now, first of all we need a new component. So we're going to add generate component, and we can see here if we want to nest it inside the cars. So if you want our component to be inside cars, and maybe add an add car component, we can say here cars add, or car add is your whatever is your preference in naming conventions and so on. So we're going to generate this component. I'm going to wait a bit. Now we're going to generate a new service. Let's say this is called car service maybe. And it's actually a good idea to put the services, to put them in a separate folder inside your application. So let's take a look what happened in our IDE. So we have the new component added inside the cars, and we actually have a car service. So to make this nicer, we can actually add make a new folder called services. Obviously you need to spell it correctly. So we're going to move this from here to services. Okay, so for this we need our task at hand is to handle the list from the cars component, to handle it using a service, right? So in our case here, we will not going to use directly, we're not going to import from the car list. So we're going to import, we are going to use the service. So in this case, we're going to use dependency injection. So for this, we're going to say car service. Let's say car service of this type. Car service, and we need to import this, obviously. So in our callback, in our engine init, we're gonna say this cars equals to car service get cars. So obviously we don't have this method called get cars. So obviously we need to create it. So we go inside the car service here. I'm going to say get cars. We can make just like in our car components, we can make a local variable here. Obviously we need to import cars, the car model. So basically here we need to basically return, yes, these cars. So we need to initialize cars in our constructor. We're going to say this cars equals to cars, and here we're going to import from car list, we're going to import cars. Okay. So our service is done. So now I should be able to see this working. So you see nothing changed. Our service works correctly. Let's see, yes. So we use the service we just created to get the data from our list, and we use the component to just display it. As I explained to you in class, the components are used to just display data, to have a minimal part of logic, and the services are the heavy lifters of our application. So basically we use services to get data, to process data. If we are on the chapter of service, we can make a new method here that we're going to use probably later. Delete car and delete car. So we make our CRUD methods here. We can see that later we're going to have points that require to edit. So we're going to need to edit the list. We're going to need to delete to implement the edit and delete functionalities, and this is actually a very big point in our ticket here. So let's get started working on the car form. We've just created with our Angular CLI, we've created this cars add component here. So you can actually see that we have a selector for this component. So let's use this component, let's use it inside our cars component. So for this, let's make actually our list. So let's put it aside. Let's make a div container, and inside here, let's make a div row. Inside div row, we're gonna make a div with a call md width, and after this, on the same level, we're gonna make a div call md4. So what I just did was using Emmet. So Emmet, you can use it with I think right now with all the IDEs, with all the text editors, with Sublime, with Atom, with IntelliJ, WebStorm, whatever. So basically, you saw me how you can very quickly type. You can very quickly prototype structure for your website. So, or for your page. So what can we do right now is you can copy this list. You can put it inside this OMD8, which is going to take 2/3 of our page. And here we can actually add the form inside here. Here we can use our cars add component. So we specify up cars add, import it here. Let's see if this worked actually and how this crazy command worked. You can actually add, if you want to make this nicer, you can add a title here. For each section you can have a title, and you can display a title here using interpolation. So let's replace this with a form here. So we go in our cars add component. We're going to make a form. So don't specify any action. By default, Angular will detect this form tag and it will automatically convert it to an Angular form as long as you have the forms module in your app module. So this means that we need to import here in our imports. Let's add our forms module. You can actually import this from forms module from Angular forms. Should be fine. So coming back to our form, obviously we need to map to our structure. So our structure in the car model. So you take this. So let's have this as a model for us, for our form. Let's make a comment here. And let's pass this here, and also let's do the same for the engine model. So let's take this. And coming back here, we can remove this after we finish. But for now, it's easier to just see what our fields will be. So basically, our fields will map for brand, model, year, price, kilometers. This is going to do a nested form inside here, because an engine is going to be a nested element. So let's start with element is failing us. So let's give it a name by default. Let's give it brand. So here we can actually duplicate this a number of times. So we can say for model, here is going to be number, it's going to be year, price the type number, sorry, the name is going to be price, and here we'll have kilometers, going to be a number, we'll have km, and we can leave engine for later for now. So all of this can have a class here called a bootstrap class called form control. Okay, and we can wrap all of this inside a div called form group with the class of form group. So this, let's actually make 4 more, and div form group types form. So here I'm gonna have like this. So take this one here, this one here, and so on. So another thing you could do for usability, you can add a label here. So you can say for brand, obviously we need to add a new ID. Same here for model. Okay. Well, let's not forget here to specify the brand label. And actually, we can just copy paste this. So I have price. This is going to be KM. Okay. Let's check brand model. We don't have the ID here. Here we're gonna have for year. Okay, for price, ID price, kilometer. So now we need a button, type submit. So let's say submit form. So actually here we can just add a class of btn primary, and add another one to a set. Well, actually, let's keep it just submit and set here. So here actually you can say something like this, div button group. Put all of this inside. Let's check our form. As you can see, we have this. So here we've done a mistake. You see, you have 2 times smaller. So let's check. We have 2 times the same label here. So our form works as expected, as you expect form to work. So looking now at the form, we see that it's not very well structured. We have this very big fields for year, for price, for kilometers, and actually we could put the brand and model on the same row. Another thing is that we're going to have to put the engine, and we need to structure the form so that we show that we have two sides of the form. So let's split this into first of all, let's make this a bit bigger, and let's make this 7 and this 5. So this now should be a bit wider. Okay. So the next thing that I want to do is to split this. So let's say this form group here is going to be, add a new class, going to be called MD6. The same for model. For year, let's make this column D4. Same for this guy here. Let's check our form. So looks a bit better. Another thing that we can do, we can add a field set. As here we can say we can have a legend. Instead of the legend, we can say car data, car info, and we can have a second field set. And this can be engine. Okay, so this means that we can copy all of this up here, except the button group. So we can copy all of this here, and this means that we need to add also the engine, the fuel, the power, and the consumption. So as you can see here, the fuel is going to be one of these values, so we can either get it from the server from somewhere, and we can specify this list here, or we can hard code it for now because we only have 3 values. So let's add in this case, let's have a select here, uniform group. It's going to be full width, and we're going to have a label. It's going to be fuel. Here we're going to have a select fuel, and it's going to be fuel. And instead we're going to have options. So first of all, we're going to have an empty value. So it's going to be like this. And let's add one for petrol. One for diesel. For electric here. Okay. Next we need to have 2 other divs that are going to be column D6 and times 2, and inside here we're going to have just an input type of number, so we can just copy paste one from here. Let's get maybe this one. This occasion we can arrange it a bit. So inside here, past this one, so we need the power, and this guy. Okay, the same for here. We're going to say for consumption, we can have this consumption. So I think actually let's leave this here so we can check after that our form. So we'll wait for our application to render. So you see now we have car info, engine info. What we actually forgot to put in our select is to give it a class of form control, so to make it the same as the others. So now you can see you have the fuel, have the power. Okay, so you can actually, if you don't want autocomplete like you saw before, say autocomplete off, and This means that whenever you have a form that the browser can fill automatically, it will deny this. Okay, so I think we're looking quite good for now, and let's talk a bit about the forms in Angular, the template forms. So what we can do here is actually create a template variable, let's say form equals with ng form, and this means that being a template variable, we can reference it in different parts of our template. So what we can actually do here is that we can use interpolation to output this. So we can actually output it to JSON. So here we use the pipe to format it as a JSON. So you can actually see the content of the form inside here. The same we can do with other inputs, and actually we can do this right now. So we can give it another, we can give for each input, if we want, we can give it a template variable. So let's say we give well, here we see that ng model. So but for example, here we can say after that brand equals ng model. So this means that we can actually call this brand, we can reference it everywhere here. So for example, we can say if brand is something, don't display prices. Brand or this consumption is electric, don't display the consumption if the type of engine is electric. So actually we're going to do this later. So let's actually see this in the console. So even if you see the form value as a JSON here, let's see let's log this. So let's make a debug function. So we can say that on change, so when the form changes, we're going to call a method called debug, and this method doesn't exist. So this is going to be a method of this car add component. So we referenced this variable inside here. So let's create this debug method inside our class. Make a debug method. Let's take form as param, and here we just say console log form. You can actually type this if you want, but for now it's sufficient. So let's see what happened here. So you see we logged because we said we debug when the form changes. We debug the form. So every time we added something, so this changed, we have a new ng form here. So let's copy this. Okay, we don't have ng model here. Here now everything is fine, and down here you can see our form changing like this. So when we select something, these are the values of our form. Looking in the console, we can see that our ng form is formed by this control, by form groups. We have all our controls here. We have the state of the form. It can be dirty. It's dirty because we modify the values. it's not disabled. So we have all these values like invalid, it's pristine. No, it's not pristine because we actually modified the data. The root of this form, so for now, for example, the form is valid, we have a status, it is touched. So you can see all of this, and furthermore you can see for all of these controls you can go down in the tree and you can see for example errors. You don't have any because we haven't specified any validators. You can see if it's a dirty or not. So for example, for the brand, let's see how this changes. So if let's refresh this and let's check the initial state of this. So for our brand, we can see that it's not dirty because we haven't inputted any data. It's not touched, it shouldn't be touched because we haven't touched it. So immediately when we do this, if we click outside and we add some data, we see that now this control is going to become touched and dirty. It's dirty too and touch true. So this is the way you can debug, and this is the way you can understand better how things work with your application, with your form. So if we look a bit, before we start the validation, if you look a bit in our structure, we can see that our engine inside, our engine property inside our car class, it's type engine. But if we look in our form here, you see that we have consumption and fuel and everything is flat, so it belongs to car. What we can actually do here is that we can group all of these values. So we specified this field set here, so we know that this area is dedicated for the engine only. So we can specify here, we can set something called a model group. So we can say ng model group equals to engine. So this means that now all of these properties are gonna be set under this engine object. Let's check. We can see that we have our engine object here. So now our data is in the correct structure, that we want. So we can delete this, you don't need this anymore. What can we do now is that we can specify when we submit this, we can either specify an action. So we can say, in case of submit here, we can add a click action, click event listener, or we can add in our form, we can say something like this and just submit. It's gonna work without square brackets. We can say ng submit equals to process form, and we're going to pass inside the form. So basically we're going to pass this variable here, and actually not form but form value. If you look here, we can see that our form has this value. It's an object, basically it's a JavaScript object, a JSON. So you can see that our brand is this, the engine is this, and so on. So it's exactly our structure that we defined at the start of this exercise. So obviously we don't have this process form method anywhere, so we need to add it inside our cars add class. So let's do process form. So actually here, if you want, you can type these methods if you want. It's a good practice with TypeScript. You can say what they return. For example, if you had this debug method and it would have returned an object, you could type the type of the object returned. Process form obviously cannot return anything. So here we're gonna have a form. We're gonna have a car actually of type car. So this means that we use TypeScript to map to our object and to use the power of our IDE to process this form. So in this case, we can say here, because we have access, actually we don't have access to our service, you can say here private cars service, which is a car service. So we used again dependency injection, your dependency injection to import the service, the car service. So we can say here car service. Let's see, you have add car method. And the add car is going to take a new parameter. It's going to be car type car. So what we can do here is going to have we can push this new car, this cars push car. So inside our cars add components TS, we're going to have car service, yes, add car. Add car like this. This car. So now let's add a console log here so we can see when our form is submitted. So in our process form, but we can add also in the process form, or we can add in our service in our add car. So we say console log submitted and say car. As usual, simple quotes. One other thing that I forgot probably to mention, and probably I skipped over, in our cars.dat component here, this ng-submit is an event emitter, so this has to be inside the round brackets. It's the same as the change, so it's a submit event. So for this to work, you need to put this as ng-submit inside brackets, parentheses. Let's check our form now. So let's add a brand here, and let's say this model GL year 2000 price 2000, I don't know. It's petrol. Now let's submit. So you see now we have the console from our service. So as you can see, we have the data that we've submitted. But as you can see, our form automatically updated the data in the other component. So in our in cars component TS, because as you can see here, we have this on init. We have a subscription to this car service. Even without using an observable, even without using an event from our cars add component, so even without having an output event, this automatically updated for us. So if we, for example, submit more, you can see that this updates. So far so good. We need to implement the same methods for edit and delete, and we actually need to check how is our progress going here. So we have the component for listing. We've done this. We've added. So we've completed this one. And what we need to do now is to replace the hard-coded list with values coming from our server. If you remember, we have our local JSON server, the cars endpoint. So what we can actually do, we can take from our car list here. We can take all of these values and we can move them in our db.json. So here we can have them inside here. Automatically going to add some from our application. Let's refresh this. And still we have an issue. Line 4. So the issue is that why? Very expected JSON. Okay. Actually, you can check your JSON validity using website called JSON formatter or JSON validator, or you can search on Google about this. You can pass your JSON and you can check if your JSON is valid or not. So right now it's invalid because we don't have we don't have the entire object here. So we need to copy this, put it inside. And now our JSON is valid, as you can see. So let's go back to our server here and let's refresh. And as you can see, now we have our car data. What we can do now is that we can replace in our car service, instead of adding this to our predefined list, predefined array, you can add you can use HTTP client. So you can use so to make a call to our JSON server, we need to import our HTTP client module. So to do this, we need to import here HTTP client module. And this is going to come from Angular 4 HTTP common and HTTPS. So now we can import in our service, in our car service. We can say import HTTP client from Angular common HTTP. Now this means that we can use we can create a new property inside this service. We can say private HTTP is HTTP client. Now we can say this HTTP post. You can put HTTP localhost 3000 3000/cars, and we need to provide what we post here. So we'll have a car. Again, TSNet is complaining about double quotes. So we can return this, and so add car, it's going to return an observable. We can even specify this here. We can have an observable of type. So the idea is that for this to work, so when we call add car, nothing is going to happen. So obviously we're going to push this to our car list, but we are not going to actually make the call to our JSON server. So to do this, we need to subscribe to this observable. So in our add components, in here, when we call add car, we need to subscribe here. So we're going to say subscribe, and here we're going to have the new car created, type car, and here we're going to say for now let's just put an alert and say car has been submitted. Again, simple brackets, simple quotes. Okay. What we can actually do is that we can instantiate it directly. We can use the Angular's dependency injection, and instead of having the HTTP property here, we can have it directly created like this. HTTP client. So obviously we don't need this. Now it should work correctly. So if you go back in our car app, if we select something here, you can actually watch the network tab. And if we submit here, we see we have a request. So first of all, we have error 500, which is basically a server error. So this says that you cannot read property ID of undefined. So this means that we need to add an ID to our car model. So to post to this database, to this pseudo database, we need to identify the car somehow. So for the ID, we're going to have a number. And actually, let's make in our car add component, we can add a new input somewhere here. Let's say input type hidden, and we can have this as so ID. So obviously this is not going to be displayed. So for now we're going to just use this to trick the JSON server into accepting the new ID. So hopefully it will generate a new ID for us. So let's do this. So again, we don't have property, and the problem is that if you look, our ID here is null, So let's add an for our database. Let's add because we already added for the model, for the car model. We should add also for our database. We should add this property. If you remember, the properties inside the database should be the same as the ones in the models. So if we go in our server here in our database, we add here ID. Let's say 1 for this, and the server should automatically increment this. If we refresh here, we're gonna have ID 1, and let's try to resubmit this. So the car has been submitted. So this means that if you go back in localhost 3000, here in our cars, we have 2 cars now. So the new car was submitted to our database.